The one question for me, whether I'm dealing with a 17-year-old or a 70-year-old, me asking them what makes them happy inevitably leads to the best conversation. And it's remarkable how often off where we go and off where what we discovered together has nothing to do with what they thought they were coming to talk to me about.
Welcome to Untrained. Hi, Whitney.
Hi, Iris.
Hi, we have a great guest today, someone local to me in Rochester, New York. And we have Jim Hall here, who currently serves as the Dean and Executive Director of Rochester Institute of Technology. He is passionate about innovating education for all kinds of students in any type of learning environment. Over the past 2 decades, Jim has worked with educational trailblazers to create opportunities for students, utilizing a wide range of hands-on experiences and educational tools. Collaborating with educators, government officials, and businesses, Jim's work focuses on promoting student-driven and student-centered change. That sounds pretty awesome.
And what does that mean, Iris? Why is Jim
What does that
here?
mean, Jim?
What are we going to talk
Jim,
about?
Let's ask Jim. Jim, what does that mean?
What
does your day-to-day look like?
It means I engage anybody who comes knocking on the door and is interested in some kind of, usually some kind of credential pathway that's going to improve their life situation, allow them to succeed personally or professionally. I get them at all life stages. I get 17-year-olds coming asking for help to do something different. And then I get folks all along the career arc who are reskilling, retraining, upskilling, looking to start over, looking for an opportunity to do something fresh. And I've been really lucky this past 25 years to have been working in institutions that have allowed me to kind of craft environments that are opening to meeting so many different people's needs. So I think that's what it means.
Yeah. And why you're here, why we want to have this conversation is so many of our clients are curious about change, curious about exploring change in their careers, and sometimes they don't know where to turn. So we want to invite your expertise to help people navigate. I think I want to do something different, but I don't know who to go to or what credentials I might need next. Tell us about how you work with people.
How I work with people. I wish there were something fancy and complicated, but I generally just talk and listen. And typically people tell me exactly what it is they need. And then we try to figure out whether there's a match between the institution and their budget and their timeline, or whether or not they might be served by a different kind of institution. A lot of folks think they need a degree, but in fact, they just need an opportunity to learn. And sometimes that opportunity to learn can be facilitated on their own, facilitated by online resources, by other kinds of media, and they don't really need me at all. And that's a perfectly fine outcome in my mind. But typically, there's some role for credentialing to play, and we sort of try to guide them along to figure out how they can take best advantage of what universities can offer them.
I'd love to think about, you've had 20 years of experience here, and I'm thinking about where we are in the industry as it is today, and the market as it is today. What are you seeing as trends? And I guess I'm sort of asking to focus, are people that are listening to this are really more mid-career or later career or just kind of starting, but really they're postgraduate work, post-college. What kind of trends are you seeing in the marketplace as people are coming to you? Hey, I want to reskill, upskill, or, and I even think about like technology is changing the field too. And everyone's saying that AI is going to take these jobs. I need to reskill in some place where I'm going to have some sort of competitive advantage. What are some of the things that you're seeing as a trend nowadays? And can we compare that to when you started this about 20 years ago? You were saying you have a long career in this.
Yeah, typically it was pretty straightforward for adult students 20 years ago. They knew they needed a high quality credential to get them launched. And once they got themselves launched in the world, companies typically took on the responsibility to train them in an ongoing way. And so if you had a reasonably flexible space that allowed an adult student to earn an undergraduate degree, life was pretty much straightforward after that. But over the past 15 years, particularly with the EdTech explosion, it's gotten more complicated. I would say, particularly with the hesitation in the face of those new technologies for companies to own as much of the training environment as perhaps they used to. Every company expects you to learn in an ongoing way. They just don't necessarily mean to take responsibility for it or even fund it themselves. And we could usually count on that 20 years ago. So now all kinds of operators out there, some frankly predatory, some cheap and free, some low quality, some immensely innovative and high quality, some student focused, some not so student focused. Some of the most interesting things that are out there are these crowdsourced opportunities that are really about taking advantage of an individual learner's intrinsic motivation to drive themselves along. They don't need some of the infrastructure that we assumed adult students needed 20 years ago. But all of that stuff means a much more chaotic landscape, a landscape in which the value calculation is harder and harder to make. It's not only about the investment of individual resources, but it's always about the investment of time. And so what I see is more and more mid-career learners who are kind of stuck. Do I simply take advantage of the training that my HR department has laid out for me? Do I take advantage of the kinds of training that platforms like Udacity offer me or LinkedIn Learning? Do I take advantage of new credentials being offered by really prestigious institutions on platforms like edX and Coursera? Do I get back into the classroom face to face? What do I do? Can I just drive some of this along on my own way? How do I make these choices? And universities in particular have not caught up in the career coaching space. At my own institution, which is fundamentally built around a career brand, we have an army of career consultants and career representatives. We have one career counselor for 20,000 students, to say nothing of an alumni base probably twice that size. So we're helpful to guide people along, to see them take job offers. We're less prepared to help them think through what the career arc is going to look like. And the AI piece is obviously the wild card right now in everything. I've been telling my own undergraduate students that they shouldn't believe anything we tell them because we frankly just don't know. We don't know what to tell them about some of the job categories that we've laid out in front of them and whether or not they can expect them to still be standing. We're trying to get better at teaching students about what kinds of skills might be resilient, what kinds of skills might be lasting. But frankly, I kind of feel like we're picking it out of the air right now. And that's really the hard part about this work.
Well, you have been very clear that we are dealing with the wild, wild west in many, many ways, more than ever. And so what's helpful about having somebody guide one through the wild, wild west? Can you give us a couple examples of how you've helped people navigate this and make choices as to what they need and maybe what they don't need?
Well, I think it's still an empathy game. First and foremost. And again, I think there's all kinds of variation in how people think about the education game right now, particularly education as it's provided by larger prestigious research institutions. A lot of students don't recognize, regardless of whether or not they're 17 or 47, that the teaching of students isn't necessarily the first business of institutions of that size and scale. So if you are an educator who kind of leans in with empathy and leans in that you truly want to know what somebody's life situation has been and what they've learned along the way, it's certainly an inside track to getting trust and probably getting a longer term relationship with somebody. I've seen everything under the sun. A lot of learners come to the table with a really rich experience, and they want that to count for something in this marketplace. It's not like they're desperate to leave something behind. and start over. They really want consideration for what it is they've learned, what it is that they've experienced, whether that experience is part of their primary employee responsibility over the last decade, or maybe it's an avocation that they picked up. They've spent a lot of time learning about gardening, or they've been trying to run a small business on the side. They want that to be meaningful too, in whatever organization they gravitate towards and whatever learning institution they gravitate towards. So we're really lucky at RIT, and that we have a significant number of flexible learning tools that allows us to do prior learning assessment, that allows us to do credit by experience, and give students a kind of head start on some of those things in both the undergraduate and the graduate space. And that makes my job easier. A lot of the work that I do is about connecting. I think that's how Iris and I met and started talking, is somebody tells you your problem and you say, I can help you a little bit, but we really need to talk to this person over here. And I think if you do that in an authentic way too, this work is a heck of a lot of fun. A lot of what I see, particularly amongst adult students, is I've just got this passion that I'm desperate to tell somebody about. And can I tell you a little bit about it? Can I tell you what my stops and starts have been? Can I tell you about why it's difficult to do while I'm raising 3 kids? Can I tell you why it's hard to do when we had this family illness that we didn't expect, that has set us back? So I don't know that there's a particular playbook other than to listen as broadly as you can and do the best you can as an engaged listener to help people make sense of the world they find themselves in.
Do you have any thoughts on, when I hear this, I typically think maybe they need some sort of low-level learning. Maybe if I hear this, I want to direct them to a place of, it's not upskilling you need at all. And I'm going to pause for a second and just tell my story. Is I definitely have a pattern, and Whitney knows this too, is, well, if I just get my PhD in this, then I'll finally be able to do X. And in truth, it has nothing to do with it. It's just I'm feeling kind of all sorts of ways about how I am right now in my career, but really I don't need all that. Maybe I need some upskilling in speaking about my brand, or thinking about whether or not this is the pathway, or getting curious about something else that could lead me in a different path. So,
or just believing in yourself, or just trusting yourself,
and trusting myself. I have trouble with that, Jim. I have trouble with that. So I'd love to hear from you as you're coaching someone who comes to your door of like, I think at what point. And I think the solid question is, at what point do you say, I really think you should come and do some graduate work, and I can connect the dots at RIT for you to get this degree that I think would be important for you and your development? How do you know? How does one how do you know? It feels like a sorting hat almost, Jim.
The PhD one is a good one, right? I mean, that one comes to me all the time. And usually my response is, how do you think this is going to make life better? How do you think life is going to be different when this is done? And then usually the person has no clue at all, either about what the experience is or what their possibilities will be once that's done. So that's certainly a good one. The other one I get a lot of is that I want to write. I want to write. I want to create. I've been in a job that has not acknowledged the creative side of me. My first response there is always, what did you write today? Well, I didn't write anything today. Well, what did you write last week? I didn't write anything last week. And sometimes it's just about giving people permission and a nudge and a kick to get on with it. You don't need, you might benefit from being in a class and being around some other people that are struggling with the same thing. But what you really need to do is get on with it and share the work that you want to produce. So those ones are certainly calm. I do think sometimes it's when a conversation leads to somebody would really benefit from having access to a very specific kind of resource that the institution provides. It's not easily duplicable out in the world. And yes, it would be worth your while to work with us so that we can get you access to that resource. There are cases, I think, when people really need a communal learning opportunity where it's clear that they would benefit from being in a classroom and being with other people that are hungry about learning. working to transform themselves together. You have to remind them that not all learning environments are zero sum. You can find yourself in a learning environment where people want to defeat you, where people think that the only way in which they can win is by making you lose. And that might be discouraging to you. And so you should think carefully about the kind of learning environment you choose. Sometimes, for instance, folks will say, I really, really, really want to get into MIT, or I really want to get into Stanford. And with an idealized vision of what support might look like in those spaces. And so sometimes it's about helping folks, I think, to think through the widest range of opportunities that might be available to them, and that the most prestigious one isn't necessarily the one that's going to serve them best. So again, the nudge, the kick, the making sense of whether there's real return on the resource that you're after, and then just figuring out the credentialing piece, whether or not that's really going to be transformative for you, or is it something else that you're after here?
So, Jim, when it comes to transformation, transition, there's often a lot of excitement, there's a lot of passion, and we as coaches know there's also a lot of depression, stuckness, self-doubt. It's a potential crevasse for people. So for folks who are considering a change, really feeling drawn to a change, there's also a wide menu of resources out there to even, partner with when it comes to change. And you're a pretty unique offering at an institution, but what do you recommend to people who are listening and saying, oh, I am interested in a change, but I don't know what to do next? What would you recommend?
If you have access to high quality coaching, you should absolutely take advantage of it. I don't know how many people know how to find it. I don't know. It surprisingly doesn't present itself in a straightforward way. If you start Googling around career coach, you find a kind of a real mess of things with various kinds of certifications and various kinds of endorsements that aren't always necessarily transparent to you. So I think certainly conversing with lots of folks, if you can find folks who have gone through that process to give you frank feedback on where it worked and where it didn't work. I like to remind folks that the coaching that I provide, the kinds of coaching that you folks provide, is not going to be a solution to your ongoing mental health problem. It's not going to be a solution to the financial crisis that you're in at the moment. Those are not things that we are particularly good at solving. We can help you make decisions about whether or not doing something in parallel to trying to solve those problems might be helpful to you. But typically those are things that need to be worked out first before you kind of dive back into the process of reinvention. Finding people you trust, finding people that you know have gone through the transition themselves, who have had the chance to rethink, who have made the value calculation, asking them about what parts of it they got wrong, so you can benefit from not making the same mistake. Certainly evaluating where your kids are and your partner is, about whether they're ready for you to head off down that path, whether they've got their own plans, whether they've got their own concerns that might make you think twice about jumping in at this given moment.
I hear a lot of, just to recap, I'm thinking about, really thinking about why it is you're really pushing people to think, why is it that you want this transition or change? What is that revealing, doing some exploration? And this isn't going to fix it. Getting a certification or a degree won't, quote unquote, fix, but it might help. But how is it going to help? And you're really pushing them to really explore, right? So that's what that sounds like as well. And the other piece I'm hearing too is to get support and to find support and legitimate support, right? So find people that can do it, but it's not just, you find a coach and it's going to open the doors and you'll figure it all out, right? So that's the one thing. Sometimes people will come and sit in front of you and think you've got all the answers. So, I'll sit with you and you'll make it work for me. We are all just guides along the pathway is what I'm hearing too. So, I think it's important because people often feel like I want to transition, but I'm not sure what it is. And sometimes as a coach, I can see where they are on the journey, same as you. And I think, why don't you do this for a couple of months and try it out first? And then we'll come back, right? And then we'll reconvene and see where you are. And oftentimes I see them in a wholly different spot in 3 months. Or maybe they're like, you know what, actually my job isn't so bad, right? So sometimes even the reevaluation helps them to like reinvigorate, you know what, I actually kind of like where I'm at. And maybe I could add a little something on the side, right? So it sounds, so that's the one thing I want to get across too. It's not when you're in this transition phase or you're craving some transition, exploration and finding support for that exploration is going to be key. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. I wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say what Ira said in Untrained speak. Career transitions are not an individual sport. They are a team sport.
Yeah, and they're not the discourse of being boldly encouraged to change and take on something new is not the only discourse out there. And I was telling folks before we started that we were involved in a search committee meeting this morning where we're looking at a really diverse group of professionals with long life paths. And some people in the room really valued people who clearly had taken bold steps in their career and went off on new pathways and took on new things and retrained and tried something different. There were other people in the room who really valued a consistent record over time, clear resilience, loyalty to an institution and a path. And I think that's one of the puzzles is sorting out how you navigate between that kind of contradictory set of expectations that the world sometimes has. And that goes all the way down to family. Sometimes family just wants you to be the person that you are and to continue on with the stability that you provide and the role that you perform. I do think that I've gotten good over the years at steering people away from either or decisions. It's now or never. I'm all in or all out. And I think it's much more variable than that. I think we bump along. It's kind of like your relationship with your Duolingo app. You stick with it for 6 months, and you get a little bit better, and then you leave it aside for 3 months, and you come back to it, and you find it's not as hard to come back to it. And you recognize that you probably need a lot of tools in front of you to actually learn this thing that you'd like to learn.
Mm. Well, I love all the coaching questions this has led us to just on a base level. The first one you provided, what do you think will be different when you make this transition? Sort of what is at stake for you? What's the core desire? Can this be met in other ways? Are you doing the things that you say you love and you want to be doing? And how can you get your feet wet with them? If you are going to make a change, how do the people around you feel about it? And are you up for facing that, dealing with that, taking that on? And what kind of a human are you? Are you a bold step, love to try new things, that gives me energy? Or are you a small incremental change person because that's what gives you energy? So you've presented us with a lot of wonderful questions for people contemplating a change to start with. And then, we always say, as you've said, finding professionals is key, and tapping in your network, I think, is a wonderful way to do that. Just reaching out to the people you trust, maybe who've gone through this before. How did you do it? Who did you work with? Who might you recommend? Anything else you want to say for the people nodding as we're having a conversation about career transitions?
Well, for me, and I love that last one you came to. For me, the informational interview is the superpower that we all have, that people don't know that language. And I try to teach it to 17-year-olds and to 77-year-olds. Mm-hmm. You can call people and you can ask them to tell you about a job. You're not asking for the job. You'd like to know about a job. You'd like to know about a different role. You'd like to tell them a little bit about yourself. And, I have found it to be incredibly freeing to people to discover that folks are open to those conversations. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of an example from this week, but Someone says, I think I'd like to work in digital marketing. Have you talked to anybody in digital marketing? No, I've never talked to anybody in digital marketing. Well, here are some companies that employ digital marketers in this community, and you can call HR and you can ask for an informational conversation. And it blows my mind just how exciting that is to people to discover that they don't really have to operate necessarily in the dark. That talent managers, that HR directors, HR reps will spend the time. Sometimes you have to navigate a little bit and negotiate to get access to them. But generally, it's typically part of their corporate vision and typically part of their own sense of mission and their role to give you that feedback. And then just to go back to what you were saying about coaching beginnings, the one question for me, whether I'm dealing with a 17-year-old or a 70-year-old, me asking them what makes them happy inevitably leads to the best conversation. And it's remarkable how often off where we go and off where what we discovered together has nothing to do with what they thought they were coming to talk to me about. Moving from earning your master's degree or earning a graduate certificate or whatever it might be, pretty quickly reveals itself really not about what's fundamental to them and what it is that they're actually looking for.
I wanted to bring up an example. I'm just connecting dots to one of your examples. The reason this conversation comes up because I had a young client who was in one industry, and she was like, I think I want to try another industry. And so, I think the informational interview piece is very interesting, but she wanted to transition from being in the tech startup space to actually going into the medical space, like becoming a doctor. And she's like, I just want to know what that's like. Are there other ways? Because I thought about it. I thought, oh my gosh, when you're 17 or 18 or you're in college, there are so many opportunities to try something, to intern somewhere. Not that you can intern as a physician, but you can intern somewhere and really understand what that looks like. But are there growing opportunities do you see out there for people as they want to transition to either intern? Are there other opportunities so that someone can go, hey, I'm interested in that industry. How do I get more information about it besides the HR? Are there any other ways in which to do that?
Yeah, I mean, typically most folks are part of some university alumni community if they're in that kind of professional role already. And I would say one of the ways in which institutions are trying to activate their alumni base is getting them to speak up and express their willingness to support other alumni, to offer themselves up as peer mentors, to offer themselves up as somebody who can tell them about what a particular job role might lead to. I'm somebody who's out on the road a fair bit talking to alums, and it's the one thing that no one ever says no to me. If I say, would you be willing to talk to students? Would you be willing to talk to other alums about what it is you do, what pleasure you get, what the limitations of the role, what the bad parts of the job might be? No one has ever turned me down, and that kind of blows my mind. That it speaks to, I think, a shared sense of responsibility. It speaks to I think a shared recognition that finding a long-term career arc is real hard work, and that it's just one of the most satisfying things you can do to play your own role to help somebody along the way. So I think that resource is out there. I think a lot of folks who are in who are thinking about the kinds of changes that you're contemplating don't think to reach out to professional associations connected to the new roles that you were just describing. But in fact, all of those folks have community outreach people. All of those folks typically can connect you to professionals in your city to again help facilitate those kinds of conversations. And I think it's not a hard one for most folks to do. Folks will offer a cautionary. I can't guarantee that I can get you this call tomorrow morning at 9. I can't guarantee you that this person can give you a week's worth of conversation. information. But if you give me a bit of time, most folks will find somebody for you that'll get answers to the questions that really intrigue you.
I think I just have one last question, and then we can wrap it up. I wanted to just ask you about your own story, because I thought it was interesting. Was your pathway well defined? Did you do some of those things? How did you get here?
Yeah, I'm certainly in the career stretch run at this point, and so I think about this a lot. How did I end up in the kind of version of education that I did? I do think there is some significant part of it that has to do with having been a first-generation college kid. So neither of my parents, excuse me, graduated from high school, much less college, and were certainly education positive and wanted me to keep going as long as I could. But it was fundamentally a mysterious environment for me. And the only way I survived it was by having people take the time to learn who I was and what things I was good at and what things I wasn't so good at, and help me make choices along the way. So in some ways, it doesn't surprise me at all that I was tenured at a Research One institution in Chicago, had a very conventional research life, and really got driven to a slightly different pathway for all of those life reasons that sometimes just intrude themselves. We couldn't afford where we were living. We had 2 young kids. We had to figure out how to get them into schools that were going to help them along the way. And so I ended up in this wholly different learning space in a leadership role that I never expected to take on. And it just gelled. It was clear this is what I was always meant to do. But it really wasn't. There was no great pool of conversation behind it, no rational choice. It really was kind of the only exit for us at the time. But I found myself doing this thing that, working with young people who had a lot of choice in front of them. And all of a sudden it was like, this is what it's supposed to be like, that what the positive psychologists call flow, right? Where you just all of a sudden feel this is different than what I was doing before. Mm-hmm. So, and now, I do think the next great pool of work for folks like you is going to be for folks who are facing a conventional retirement age, don't feel like they're ready to retire, feel like in some ways they're just getting started, and that's kind of where I am. And there's not a lot of resources out there for folks facing that particular horizon. There's a sense, that when you reach 60, you're supposed to have figured it out. It's supposed to be clear and obvious. It's just about calculating what sits in your retirement account and knowing when to pull the switch. And man, it does not feel like that at all. It's a whole new bundle of anxieties and insecurities that you're dealing with as you're trying to map out a way forward.
And opportunities. Don't forget the opportunities.
And opportunities. I know we're at the end and kind of wrapping up, but there is an article that I'll put it in the link, and HBR does talk about that, is re-looking at retirement. And what they have is a couple of statistics is last fall, the United States had 9.5 million job openings, but only 6.5 million unemployed workers, which means we have a shortage of people. And so losing people at 65, we're going to lose all of that knowledge, right? So this other piece of it too, meanwhile, the age wave continues to crest with roughly 10,000 Americans a day reaching age 65. By the end of this year, every baby boomer will be 60 or older. Employers are increasingly aware that valuable skills, experience, and connections can walk out the door with each retiree. The aggregate impact on institutional knowledge, organizational cohesion and continuity, and ultimately shareholder value can be profound. So I'm making a case, Jim, for you to continue to work beyond 65 and for others to continue to look for, know that you're not the only one out there that are later in their career, and also we haven't connected those dots, right? So companies are looking for that knowledge base. They're looking to integrate their older employees, and then older employees are looking to expand their reach and figure out what they're going to do next because they're not ready to leave. You're not the first person or the first client. I've had multiple clients in this age bracket that want to go to the next thing and often feel alone.
I think it's another space, though, where there are profoundly contradictory cultural discourses at play, right? Where, you turn on the news any night of the week right now, and we have this debate about whether or not our senior political leadership is too old and needs to step aside and make room for another generation. So I think all those things are true in terms of people should feel energetic and engaged and want new things. And at the same time, there are other cultural messages that are out there that want to nudge people to some kind of closure as well.
Well, may we be the cultural messages that counteract the messages on the news. That's a destiny.
That's a good place.
We're untraining the news and retraining.
The messages on the news.
Exactly. So what's one thing we want the audience to take away from today? That's how we end, Jim. So I'll start with Whitney, and so you can think about it. What's one thing from today's conversation you want the audience to take away, Whitney?
I don't want them to take away one thing. I want them to take away lots of things. But I guess the main thing is honor. If there's a desire within you to do something different, honor it. And we've offered a couple different options, but take an action. Get it out of your head and take an action through a conversation, through an exploration, through someone in your network, and start to move it along.
I will second that and say I love our conversation because it's not just one thing that's going to be a silver bullet, right? It's a series of conversations. It's going out and getting coffee and connecting with another human. It's just slow and steady steps while keeping in mind, I kind of want something different. So I like the idea of honoring. I like the idea of small steps. And also, you know what? It takes work, right? You're not just going to talk to Jim and then you're going to feel better about your job, right? Or one of us. It's a conversation and work that you're going to need to do for yourself.
And feeling uncomfortable is inevitable.
Inevitable. How about you, Jim?
Well, and if you're not feeling uncomfortable, you should keep working yourself into that conversation to the point where you do start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. I would honor by finding the most diverse conversation partners you can possibly find. Don't just go get yes people who are just going to endorse what it is that you want to do. Find some folks that are going to ask hard questions too about the sustainability of the path that you're imagining for yourself. And recognize that folks like me are selling a product. When you're talking to me about the value of university education, it's because ultimately I have an incentive to get you into a university education path. And that may or may not be the best thing for you. I think I'm pretty good about being transparent about that role. And I think I'm even better at telling people when it's not the best fit for them. But that's not always the case with every conversation partner that you're going to find.
Thank you so much for being a part of the Untrained podcast. And for
we
the
get
audience,
to do this again?
Yeah, you want to do it? Is it fun? You enjoyed it? Yay! See,
yes, I did.
And you are a member of the Red Glasses fan club.
I forgot my red glasses. We all have red glasses, so we
do an
appreciate
all red glasses show.
Yeah. So we appreciate your time and energy. You know, for the audience, if you ever have questions, you can always reach out to us. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, on our podcasts, and we can always bring Jim back with any questions you have. We know that some people have reached out to some of our guests directly. So, Jim, if they can find you on LinkedIn under James Hall, I believe. Rochester Institute of Technology, they have reached out directly to our guests as well for more information. So that's available as well. So all of that will be in the description, and we appreciate you listening. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast and our YouTube channel. And Whitney, what do we say at the end of every podcast?
Keep untraining.
Keep untraining.